Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from venue Solace, out August 27th on A Rising Empire. This album has 10 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a German modern melodic metal band. Now overall this album feels like it has a soft shell, and what I mean by that is that it's not rigid in terms of how you can approach it in order to get the most out of it. This is really an album designed for the listener. You are on the driver's seat. It doesn't matter how you come at this album, you're always going to get the essence of the record, and the playability of the album is unharmed. The reason for that is the quality of the individual songs. This is a record built around 10 singles, so the strength of the collective really comes from the strength of the individualities. Now, I like how they alternated some styles and songs in order to create some ebbs and flows, some speed bumps along the way. I really think that's important because this is an album that is always moving, is always pulling you in different directions. But when you look at the commonalities that the tracks have, that's exactly what's keeping you on that same path from beginning all the way to the end. Once you get into the soundscape, you start to see that diversity that it's impacting the structure really comes into the forefront. This is an album that has metalcore, melodic metal, heavy metal, it has punk, it has pop, it has rock, and sometimes it has all of the above in one single track. So it's a very diverse sounding record. Because of that, you're going to have a very rich sound. It has a thick approach all around. Really well balanced, the quality stays consistent from top to bottom, and it's an album that sounds very organic. It sounds very natural. It doesn't feel like it had barriers. It doesn't feel like it was created with a sense of restrictions that we can perhaps do this or we couldn't do that, or maybe this song is going a little bit outside the box. No, this is an album that really feels organic from that perspective. It goes exactly where it needs to go. The creativity of the band was completely left alone, and they just went exactly where the songs end up going. There was no restrictions, and that really comes across in the soundscape and how rich it is throughout this record. Within that sound, I think you have to start by talking about the guitars because they're really the motor of this album. They pull you and they dictate exactly where you're going with each and every single track. Sometimes a little bit more driven, sometimes a little bit more melodic, sometimes a little bit more chunky, a little bit more gritty, sometimes all of the above in one single track, really giving you different flavors, different layers of what the guitars can do, but always being the main motor of sound, really creating the more robust portion of the overall soundscape. Once you get into the solos are magnificent. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the solos on this record is the fact that they pulled in a little bit more influences from old school rock and roll and old school heavy metal. So while the album has a very modern touch, the solos have a little bit more of a dated look. It works really well with this album, and it works really well with the tools that they had at their display. The drums and bass, they come in and they make everything feel very compact, very together, and overall that robust sound that you get is really a combination, guitars, drum, and bass working as one, pulling in the same direction and walking down that same lane together in order for the tracks to feel as big, as powerful, as robust as possible, and not really letting any single piece fall off of that wagon. So that was one thing that you notice from beginning to end that stays very consistent, that overall style, that overall sound, that overall robust presence that this album has. On top of all of that, you have two vocalists that really give you two different sides of the same coin. And I thought they were extremely important on this album because both of them ground the record. Perhaps Lela more than anybody else. She has a very specific tone. She has a very specific delivery. Her clean vocals are phenomenal, and they really become the glue of this album. But both vocalists together are the glue of this album. She's perhaps a little bit more of the anchor because her voice, her style, her approach becomes a little bit more predominant throughout this record, so you tend to gravitate a little bit more to it. That is the red line that connects this album. The individuality of the tracks, the quality that they have, the volatility that they may offer, it all becomes a little bit more subdued by how these two vocalists work together from beginning to end, setting a pattern, setting a design, setting a modus operandum, if you will, and that is something that the listener can always expect from track to track, regardless of where the sound is going. Overall, I enjoyed this record tremendously because it felt natural, it felt unrestricted, it felt free. It just felt really easy for me to process it, easy to listen to, easy to enjoy. It was not a record that really made me work for it. What you see is what you get. Now, what I would have liked to see a little bit more is perhaps some more melancholy. It was there throughout the record at times, But this is an album that feels sometimes that it's just running away from you. It has a lot of life, it has a lot of energy, and because it has a lot of life and a lot of energy, it just kind of goes away. It just walks faster than what you can stick with it. So I felt having perhaps a little bit more melancholy on a track here, on a track there, or even some nuances of that darkness and that melancholy that we saw at glimpses throughout the record would allow the album to be a little bit more balanced, and it would pause the record every so often to allow the listener to catch up to it a little bit better. As far as favorite tracks are concerned, I want to start off with Razorblade Teeth. Somber opening track and somber way of starting off this record. I really love this song because of how it starts. It really sets the tone for what this album is going to be. I love this record. It just feels that it has momentum. It feels that it has a little bit of a harsh push, specifically when the harsh vocals come in. It's a really interesting track. It's a track that fits that duet style perfect when you have two different vocalists, because the song goes wherever they're going. When the song feels a little bit more heavier, when the song feels a little bit more thicker, you're having harsh vocals coming in. When the song feels a little bit more vibrant, when it feels a little bit more energetic, you have the clean vocals coming in. So this is a very interesting track from that perspective. It has a very specific design, it has a very specific structure, it stays with it from beginning to end, but the dynamics between the two vocalists and the dynamics between those two different sides of one coin work really well throughout this track. Next you have Into the Fire. I love the rock riff that gets this track started. It just has a sense of progression. This is a song that feels, from that first riff, from that first sound, you're building towards something. There's something that you're going to work towards, and that something is the chorus. The guitar sound overall feels very thick, very driven, and that gives overall depth to the song and gives you that sense of growth and gives you that sense of direction. The changing in vocals, it's really the dynamic push that this track needed. While perhaps you feel like you understand where the music is going, because while not having a linear path, it has exponential growth to it. The vocals kind of create the ebbs and flows, they kind of create the changes, and allows the song to feel a little bit more dynamic than perhaps what it would otherwise. The solo on this track brings that rock and roll vibe that we saw in that opening riff back into the forefront, and you're reminded of how rocky this song really is, how much of a throwback this song is when you look at the meat and bones of the track. Outside of it, there's a lot of melody, there's a lot of different modern elements, but the skeleton of this track really has that rock vibe pushing itself into the forefront. Last but not least, Our Destiny. This is a more pop-driven track all around, vocally and musically. It still has that melodic drive sound that really encompasses the song, but overall it's a track that, while being upbeat, it never feels like it explodes. The lyrics of the track and the overall experience that it generates really match more that pop rock style, that pop rock approach. It's a song that feels bright, it feels a little bit softer, it works well because it still doesn't lose a lot of the DNA that we saw from the band up until this point. These are elements that we saw throughout the record, so this is nothing new here, but perhaps it's a little bit more on the forefront. It's perhaps a little bit more less disguised, so you feel like this is more of a pop track all around, because you just don't have enough around it to hide that essence. You don't have enough heaviness, you don't have enough of the guitar's drive pushing it forward, and the vocals themselves really come in and give the song a little bit more of a different tone, of a different delivery, of a different vibe all around. But I still really enjoy this song because it feels stripped out, but at the same time it feels very hooky and very catchy all around. This is it. Venues with Solace, out August 27th on A Rising Empire. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.